world of coaching evolving and the carousel always changing, we're going to sit down with some coaches and we're going to figure out what they coach, how they coach, and most importantly, why they got into this profession. My name is Kason Wilkinson, and I am your host of the Coaches Why podcast.
That's a great question.
That was my Coaches Why.
Welcome back to another Coaches Why podcast, guys. We have a very special guest joining the show today, all the way from Lewis and Clark College, newly named college. I mean, maybe not the new mascot. There we go. Coach Matt Kosderka. Holy smokes! I said it 4 times before we got on here, and I still messed it up. Matt Kosderka. There we go. Matt Kosderka. There we go. I'm gonna get it right by the end of the show consistently. Matt Kosderka. There we go. From Lewis and Clark College. Coach, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, man. I appreciate you jumping on and doing this. And so, Coach, tell me a little bit about yourself. I mean, where'd you grow up? I mean, when did you get involved in the sport of baseball and maybe all sports? But tell me a little bit about you before we got into coaching world.
Yeah, I grew up in Southern Oregon in a town called Roseburg, small little town, but athletics was a big deal there. Big football town, as most Oregon schools, and I think a lot of schools around the country are. But I was a 3-sport athlete. Played football, basketball, baseball. Basketball was probably my love. Growing up, I thought I was, going to go in the NBA, and then I got to high school and realized there's no slow 6'2" white guys playing in the NBA, and so I figured I'd better try something else. I really fell in love with baseball kind of my sophomore year of high school, and realized that it was a sport I really loved. And ever since I made that decision, I kind of decided hey, I was going to try to get to the next level and put a lot of work in. And eventually went to Willamette, a smaller D3 school in the northern part of Oregon, and another school in our conference, and had a great experience there. Got an opportunity to play professionally after a lot of hard work, and thankfully the Rangers, who I was playing for in their minor leagues, released me and gave me a chance to get into coaching, which I think is really what I was meant to do.
For sure, yeah. We'll get into the conversation about what made it your calling essentially, but you say that you put in a lot of hard work, right, to get the opportunity to go play for the Rangers at that level. I mean, tell me what that experience is like. What was it all that it lived up to be? I mean, just how the minor league system and the major league systems working hand in hand. Like, tell me what that experience was like. Not only going from that school in Oregon to now you're for this big organization.
Yeah, it was definitely a very different experience than maybe I expected. I got sent to the East Coast right away in Virginia, and I'd hardly ever left Oregon, so that was a whole new world. And I played in a year and a half in Georgia, played a year and a half in Florida, so it was a lot different than I was used to. So just that whole aspect. I was older, so I graduated from college and played with a lot of high school guys. Well, I couldn't imagine what that was like for them, but I think really kind of learning how to prosper on your own without really a support system is something that was a big challenge, but I think, luckily I was a little bit older, like I said, and I could kind of figure those things out. The minor leagues is a lot different than it is today. The pay was very little back then. We were living in some interesting places, and, long road trips. They don't quite have that as much today, but it was a great experience. I wanted a chance to prove that I was the best, and I think I reached my peak ability. Unfortunately, I wasn't good enough to get to the big leagues and continue that career, but it was a great opportunity, and a great reward for all the hard work that I put in to get that chance. And like I said, I think I learned a lot from that experience, a lot about failure. And to be honest with you, at the end of my career, I probably wasn't good enough to continue, but I couldn't handle the failure. And so when they released me, it was probably, like I said, a godsend, not only in terms of releasing me into my next career and what I think I was meant to do, but I think just kind of really teaching me about the ability to stick to it and to deal with those hard times. A lot of kids are kind of guarded from that nowadays, and so I think those lessons really kind of taught me how to help those kids kind of deal with those things now as a coach and a mentor.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, especially when you say that you had a chance to learn how to deal with failure, right, and that adversity in life, learning how to pivot from what do I do next, essentially, whether it's from work or if you're a college athlete, right, an injury, whatever that situation may be. So now that you've had a chance to go back into the world of coaching after this time, kind of jumping ahead here, but, you have probably a lot of kids who have aspirations to go play at the big leagues, right? And so there's kind of a two-parter here. One of them is what do you say to those kids whenever, they show up here, or here to your facility, and they have those dreams, but they don't really have whether it's the tools, whether it's the work ethic, whether it's the mentality, right? Because professional sports is a dog eat dog world. Really, maybe all sports. Really, once you get to varsity sports, even in maybe high school, but really, right, when you get to that highest level, it's a dog eat dog world, as harsh as that may seem. So, how do you coach a kid through those maybe not humbling moments, but realistic moments of telling them, hey, these are the things we have to do in order to get there, right? So, like, how do you coach a kid who maybe struggles with that type of mentality, who maybe was spoon fed a little bit to where they were that guy where they're from?
Yeah. I think it's a tough challenge, and it comes up a lot. I was not a pro prospect out of high school at all. I threw 81 to 84, and I remember telling people I was going to play professional baseball when I got to college, and people were laughing at me and telling me I needed a backup plan. But I was so dedicated that I was going to make it happen, and luckily I was. But I know it doesn't happen for everybody. I've had some great players in our program who I thought maybe had a shot and didn't get a shot. So again, nowadays with fewer minor league teams, with the draft being only 20 rounds, I don't think I get drafted anymore, which is great to think about. But I want to be honest with those kids. I want to tell them, like, hey, it's very difficult. There's a lot of things that get into it. I know what I did to get there in terms of work ethic, but also, like I said, I never want to ignore somebody's dreams. Again, I was not a pro prospect, so I never want to say, no, you can't do it, because I think that's a number one crusher right there, because you never know. And so I want to encourage them, hey, if you want to do it, I'll talk to you about what it takes. But you got to understand, like, this and that. And I think even like coming to the D3 level, a lot of guys come here and think like, oh, they're going to dominate, and they're like, whoa, this is good. And and they struggle when they get here, and it's, they all want to go Division 1, and they realize when they get here that it's a little bit better than they thought, a little bit harder than they thought. And I was a pretty good college pitcher. I was the first team All-American, but when I got to pro ball, it was a different level, right?
Right.
I was not quite on the level as I needed to be to get to the top level. So it's a challenge, but I want to encourage them at the same time. But I'm also going to be realistic. If I don't tell them the truth, I think I'm really wasting their time. And so those are the conversations we have.
Yeah, you'd be doing a disservice if you didn't tell them the truth as well. Yeah, I think it's pretty cool to see how baseball's evolved over time, right? Just from the sheer level of talent. From, I'm not saying like Nolan Ryan or, some of those guys couldn't have been successful, because they were obviously really, really good, but the level of hitting has changed so much, in the last 20 years, maybe as a whole, right? There's always been really good hitters. There's always been really good athletes in baseball. And I know baseball is one of those sports where evolving, like, basketball, it went from being really big and really being in the paint, no real shooting, to where now it's a 3-ball game. Football used to be an all running game. Now it's a lot of passing. So the quarterback had to evolve. Baseball has always been, if you want to be good, you have to be able to hit, and you got to be able to pitch, right? Those are the first two things that get you an opportunity, at least to be a successful team and probably a successful player, is you got to have a decent toolbox of tools, right? And so, you say that these kids may not have been able to get drafted in today's world of baseball, just because of how things have went. So, like, whenever you are talking to some of these kids, right, and you say some of these people are, they go to D3 and they don't think it's what it is because it's D3, like, how do you, it's probably a wall that some kids may give you in recruiting, because everybody probably has that mentality, especially in today's world, which we'll get into a little bit. People like to go JUCO and then jump to D1, is because that's been like a big thing, right? But then there's obviously guys who are in every league that are really good. But what I'm getting to is how do you kind of face that wall, which we'll get into recruiting deeper in a little bit, but how do you kind of overcome that wall whenever you're coming after a kid for D3, and that kid may have their guard up, or maybe have like this negative annotation of what Division 3 baseball is?
Again, another great challenge of kind of the world that I live in, and I think other coaches on my level do as well. I think you have to be honest with kids and kind of explain, the opportunities that are here that are a little different than some of those other levels. I think the great thing about Division 3 baseball is that it's very high quality baseball, but it's also an opportunity to be a college student. And something that we talk about a lot in our program is we're going to offer the complete college experience here, where you get to do all the other things that a regular student does, but get as much baseball at a higher level as you can. Now, there certainly are some limitations, especially in the fall, about how much time we spend together as a team. But again, I think most of the guys who are looking at our level kind of understand that they want something more than just baseball. They understand that probably they're just going to have a career outside of baseball when they get done with their time here, and they want to make sure they're as prepared as possible for that. That's hard for a 17-year-old, 18-year-old kid to understand. Because everybody thinks they're going to go, to a Division I school and start. I'm like, well, there's some pretty good players at that school already.
Right.
And there's this little thing called the portal now that's a little bit crazy, but even though it's pro level, there's a million guys who get to pro baseball and never make it to the big leagues. So it's always kind of a weeding out process, and so we're trying to really explain kind of that long-term opportunity that you can get.
Yeah.
Again, it's hard for young kids to understand those things, but I think the ones that we find are the ones who kind of understand that this is going to set me up for a long time. And so those are definitely challenges, because again, there's a lot of shiny bells and whistles at the upper levels that we don't have, and so I think you have to find the kids who are kind of looking for what you're offering.
For sure. Yeah, the academics of Division III are outstanding, right? At least I feel like at least 80% of the schools in Division III, I can't, maybe higher, maybe lower, I don't know, but I feel like Division III, you usually get a really well represented, or maybe respected is probably the better term, degree when you get it from a Division III school. And so I know that's obviously a big thing that you're pushing, and these kids are understanding. So absolutely understand that piece. Now, you said earlier that when you got released from the Rangers is kind of when you realized that you got into coaching, and it's kind of what you feel like you were meant to do. But when did you realize that coaching is what you wanted to do? Like, what was it that made you decide that you wanted to do it, and when, I guess, hand in hand?
I think it was always in the back of my mind, kind of going through my playing career. My mom always told me I was going to be a teacher and a coach, and I always said, no, that's not happening, no way. And then, of course, I got released, and I ended up being a teacher and a coach for a long time, and still in coaching. So, I think I always enjoyed like the thought process that it takes to be a coach and to manage a game, but also I knew that whatever I did after baseball, my career, I wanted to have an opportunity to influence young people in a positive way. And I wanted to get into college coaching right out of pro ball, but when you have no experience, that's pretty tough.
Right.
So I was fortunate to get into high school teaching and coaching, and I realized that even though I thought I knew everything at 27, I didn't. And it was probably the best thing that happened in my coaching career is I made mistakes, and I learned from those things, and I got past that, my ego being one of the big things, and that it's all about the winning side of things, and started to realize that I'm here to enhance the experience of the players who play for me. And if we just make them better baseball players and that's it, we've really wasted their time, especially at the college level. And so those are the kind of things that were always in the back of my mind. And so it just kind of was the best path forward for me. I knew I wanted to stay around baseball as well. And I like to think of myself almost as a life coach who uses baseball because that's what I know. And so, like I said, my evaluation of my ability to coach, I think, doesn't come until 10, 15 years later, when you see what the players you've coached have become. And so that's hard sometimes, because you wish you could get a little bit more feedback right away, but you hope you're doing the right things, and I think as long as you stick to what you believe is the right thing, then you're going to have success in what you're doing.
It's like you said, it's really hard to say how well you're doing until they leave and they get into the real world. One of my biggest things that I try to have, which I'm sure you and I'm sure a lot of coaches have or want to have, is, them to remember you, right? When they're 10, 15 years from when you first got them, maybe not 15, but, 5, 10 years, whatever, they're married, have kids, whatever, and they still hit you up, or they still text you, or, they still reach out or whatever. And not only to see what they're doing on the positive side of life, but also like that relationship that you guys are able to build over that time is really rewarding. I'm looking forward to that. I haven't really quite got there yet. I have a few high school kids that have reached out to me, because I coached at high school as well before here. And, I had a few kids reach out and tell me some things and all that. And it feels really good, of course. But I'm also looking forward to see what their life turns out to be. And I'm sure that, that's something that you just talked about, ego. And I think it's one of those things as a coach where I feel like it's very easy to I don't know the right terminology, maybe the right wording for it, but when it comes to the ego thing, I think it's big, especially as an athlete, it's there, but as a coach, it can be too, right? There's coaches out there that I'm sure you've experienced around that are so ego that it's like, I'll win at any cost. I'm higher than the game. I'm better than this. This is the program that runs the school. Whatever it is, you may or may not experience that, but I feel like there's definitely got to be some coaches out there that have that type of approach to their life, and so I think it's really good for us to have that humbleness, or kind of that take the ego out of it. It's important for us to understand that we're here for, like you said, life coach almost, right? There's a lot of things that I didn't realize I was going to be. I coach women's wrestling, so I'm the DJ, I'm the therapist, I'm the chef, I'm the bus driver, right? I'm all these things that I didn't really think I was going to have to be when I got it, but having those things is having to drop that to say I'm not too good for this, right? Because if I'm too good for this, then athletes are that way too. So, kind of touching on the ego thing, you especially in baseball, which this is not to say anything towards baseball at all, but baseball has athletes out there, which I'm only saying this from personal experience because I've met athletes like this. I played baseball growing up. So I probably could be considered this at one point in my life too, but I also feel like there's just athletes out there that are like this. I've met them, seen them, whatever. Ego's a big thing, right? And sometimes it can go from, instead of they're not necessarily confident anymore, they're really cocky, right? And things like that. So what I'm getting to is as a coach, how do you essentially coach a kid or get a kid to get away from that ego, to open up their eyes to realize certain things, or whatever, however you want to answer that essentially. But the ego thing, how do you coach a kid through and over that little hump maybe of the ego, to where that doesn't necessarily negatively affect your culture or chemistry, or maybe just your team, whatever that may be?
Yeah, that's a tough one as well. For me, luckily, I can recruit the guys that come to our program, so that's definitely something we look for,
Right.
guys who have that humility, right? One of the pillars of our program is we over me, and I think that carries on not just in baseball but in life. We want our guys to realize that you're just a small cog in the world, and hopefully you're trying to be the best cog that you can be, but this is about more than you. It's about us, right? And I think the game does a good job of that as well. It's a humbling game. You can
Fair.
be at the highest
Fair.
high, and then the next day, I mean, even as a coach, I'm just turned 50, and I'm been coaching for half my life, and there's still days that I'm like, do I even know what the heck I'm doing, right? So
Right.
there's always those days you get humbled, and so that helps. But I think just kind of really trying to create the focus about the team goals. All of our goals are not individual goals, right? I don't have many individual awards. The only awards we give out in our program are based on the pillars of our program, and do you do those things the best? Because I don't need to sit there and tell you who's the best pitcher and best hitter and those kind of things, where guys can see the numbers and see that stuff. So for us, we're trying to really reinforce the things that our program is about, and it's about that team atmosphere. And that's what I love about college baseball. You asked about pro baseball earlier. If I could go back and play college or pro, I would go back to college in a heartbeat. Because in pro ball, it was everybody for themselves. And there were days I was in the bullpen and I'm counting the starting pitchers to see how many pitches he's at. So if I might get a shot to pitch that day, right? And I never wanted ill will on somebody, but you always want your opportunity. For you.
Yeah.
You're trying to move up, and I think at the college level, it was just about winning. And that's what I love about our level, is that certainly there's guys who want to do well for themselves, and they should, right? You have to have a little bit of an ego to play a sport and perform in front of a bunch of people, but at the same time, hopefully your individual goals are steered to help make our team the best that it can be. So those are the messages I'm trying to shed. It doesn't always work perfectly, for sure. There's going to be guys that just personality wise, you're never going to change them, right? But you try to soften the edges as much as you can and get them to realize and try to buy in as much as you can. And as a coach, you're going to find out you can only do so much. But again, if you keep trying, then you can be satisfied at the end of the day that you gave everything you had to try to help that player realize that, again, they're a cog in the machine, and we need to make sure that that the goals of that machine accomplishing our mission is the most important thing.
Absolutely. That's a great answer to that. I think, like you said, it is very hard to figure that out, and sometimes you don't really know. And the great thing is, and sometimes it's hard, but you're in a great position, I think, as a 4-year school, that hopefully they just kind of mature out of that, right? 17, 18, 19 as a freshman, by the time they're 21 to 23, it kind of goes away and understands it's more of a team orientation, right? And that, so for sure, I can appreciate that, and you said that, well, not you said, you have spent 27 years, or that's when you got into coaching, I guess, about half your life, right? 23 years or so of your life coaching. You've been around coaches your whole life. You started with baseball and stuff like that. So what I'm getting to is, and by the way, I know this is there's probably gonna be a lot, at least a few here. So you can pick and choose a few or one or whatever. But who was an influential coach to you, and what did they teach you?
That's a good question. To be honest with you, I've had coaches who have been good influences, and I've had coaches who have taught me what not to do. So
Fair. Yeah.
I'll probably try not to talk about the guys who maybe taught me what not to do. But
Fair.
I think the first one is my father.
Okay.
He coached me a lot as a kid, and in soccer and basketball and baseball and lots of different things. And he was probably the hardest working guy I ever met. He was a Forester, so he was up at 4 a.m. out doing all this stuff. And I really think he taught me about work ethic and about taking pride. He always taught me, and it's a quote that's on the back of our locker room door, that if you're going to do anything, it better be worth putting your damn signature on. And so I think that really kind of shaped who I've become as a person. I wasn't that as a kid. Unfortunately, I was a little bit lazier than I needed to be, but I've really kind of changed into, you talk about kind of growing into that maturity level. And so I think my father was a big one. And just like the dedication that he showed was awesome. I had some good coaches in high school. I think one that really influenced me a lot was a guy named Russ Bolin, who's now the AD at my old high school. And he was a guy who was younger at the time, so it was a little bit easier to relate to, but just taught me how to compete at all times.
Okay.
But also like to enjoy it, like, and have a good time. And it's supposed to be fun, but as long as you're working hard, then you could have that fun. And then probably two more, I would say my college coach, Dave Wong, at Willamette, was a big influence to me. Probably the best game manager I've ever seen. Just kind of ran the game like he was, he's a great poker player, because like he just kind of sees all those things. And he gave me a shot when a lot of other people weren't, and he let me kind of do my thing and kind of realized what I needed, and did a great job of kind of allowing me to kind of build my stuff on my own, because I was kind of a guy who just needed that time to kind of figure things out on my own. And then probably the last guy I'd say is a guy named Randy Rutschman, whose son is Adley in the big leagues.
Oh, really? That's cool.
I got to meet Randy after my junior year of college, when I was really frustrated I didn't get drafted, and I went and played on the semi-pro team that Randy was running. And the most positive person I've ever seen in my life, still to this day. I still have conversations with him, and he blows me away. And I think I was probably more of a negative guy kind of going through high school, unfortunately, and he taught me the power of like having that positive mindset. And there's still days that I battle with that. But Randy really kind of showed me about really giving to other people and being selfless. And I think those are things that have all kind of hopefully helped me in my career. I'm not perfect by any means, but I think, especially as my coaching career has evolved, I've started to really kind of take those traits and try to blend them together to be kind of who I am now.
Yeah, that positive thought process, I think, is a very underrated thing to be self-focused on. But you saying that, I'm the exact same way, and I feel like I've always been that way. I've been very, very hard on myself in a lot of areas, in terms of, if I don't succeed, or if I do succeed, or the mistakes I make or don't make, and whatever it may be, very, very hard on myself, and that usually turned into that negative thought process, like, oh, you're not good enough, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, I wish I had this, right, or whatever the thought processes I have in that moment. But I think it does, like you said, as you've evolved, it does help with not only your internal and yourself, but I think it does help as a coach too, because I'm sure you experience and you see kids who beat themselves up, right? They make one error, they could have been, game 25 into the season, and they've been, batting 350 or batting 350, and in the field they've been, 1,000 for, they've been fielding 1,000%, and then that one error they make in a tight moment, right? It could have been, conference game, whatever the case is, and they make that mistake, they beat the hell out of themselves, right? Even though they've had an amazing season, and without them, they wouldn't, maybe the team or them wouldn't be here, but because they made that mistake in that crucial moment, or maybe it wasn't, but whatever the case is, they beat the hell out of themselves, right? And yeah, it's understandable, right? Like, that was a big moment that we don't want that, but like, dang, it's very easy to beat yourself up. And I'm sure that as a coach, it kind of helps you maybe coach some kids through that, or maybe just notice it and be able to talk to somebody when you see that. I do that, so I'm sure that's something that you probably are able to do just because that was you.
Well, I think, to be honest with you, like my default is probably negative, right? Again, I was super hard on myself. I get frustrated still to these days, and but I think once you've done it enough, you kind of realize that that doesn't help. Me yelling at a kid for making a mistake is not going to get him better. Again, there certainly needs to be accountability, and we need to have those high expectations. And to be honest with you, like we have a ton of high achievers in our program, and so when things don't go the way they want to, sometimes that's tough for them because they have such high expectations. So, like you said, you're definitely a kind of a psychologist at the same time. But I think again, if you really have the kid's best interest in mind, then you'll be able to look past like your frustrations with them and realize what does that person need from me to help get through this situation so they can play at their peak ability. One thing I ask, I'm not a super faithful religious guy, but for every game, I ask that God gives me the power to support my guys in the way they need. And some days I'm good at that, sometimes I'm not as good as I should be. But I think as a coach, hopefully that's what we're really here about because our careers are over. And even at the highest level, right? Like our job is to get the most out of our players. And I think if you're focused on yourself, that's hard to do. So. Again, like I'm not perfect at it, but it's definitely something I try to pay attention to as much as I can to help our players, get to their peak ability.
Yeah, the idea that our dream, our goal, our playing careers are over, and we're kind of I like to reference this. This may be a thought process other people have had. Maybe it's not, but I said it one day, and one of my actually the men's coach that is here, I said it to him, and he's like, "That was really good." But it's kind of cool that even though we may not have reached our highest goals, right? We may not have reached the highest pinnacle that we maybe dreamt of or wanted to be or whatever. We are in position to where we get to help kids kind of reach their goals, right? So now our goals have kind of pivoted to where, yeah, as an athlete, we wanted to be, I don't know, let's say All-American. Now, I didn't reach it, so now I get to help these people reach their goals. So like I kind of have the second wind of dreams essentially, right? Because now my dreams are to help these kids or whoever, right, as a coach, reach their goals. So it's kind of like it's the same mindset of what I was as an athlete, but it's just kind of pivoted to where now I'm doing that for athletes. And you mentioned about I guess within the same realm of the high standards and some of those things, also jumping ahead here, but how do you coach a team or help a team or maybe even give feedback after a tough loss or after one of these moments, right? Like whenever it was a pivotal moment, like we're talking about errors and whatever, like this kid gets down on themselves. Now we're talking individually or maybe as a team, how do you coach through that to where they can get their head right, especially in baseball, right? It's short-term memory. You got a game tomorrow. You got a doubleheader today. You got 60 or how many games you have in a year, 50 games in a year, and it's only game 12, right? We have to make sure we turn this around or whatever, whatever the case is. But how do you coach a team or give that feedback after a tough loss to move on from it, essentially?
Yeah, I don't know if I was good at that when I started. And I watch like my son's team play, and I watch other teams play, and there's a 40-minute conversation after games. And to be honest with you, after games, I don't think the kids are listening. I don't know if I was listening either. So we try to make it short, right? And I think I'm certainly honest with them, right? We'll talk about, hey man, we just can't make that many mistakes and beat it, and especially a good team. And so they need to understand like those things happen, but at the same time, just like the other day, I told them like, hey, I don't need to rehash what just happened. Y'all watched it. For me, it's more about was our effort and energy where it needed to be, and if it's not, then that's the conversation I'll get maybe frustrated with about. But I've also done a better job, I think, of we lost the game the other day when we got 10 runs in the first game, and we talked about like, hey, that game has nothing to do with the next one, and so you have to just be able to flush this and get to the next one. Whereas in the past, I probably would have been really upset and frustrated and harshed on it, and that would have carried over in the second game. It probably cost us to lose the second game, but we were able to come back and win the second game because, again, like if you can reshape the minds of the kids, it's like my son when he was a little kid and he would cry. I just get him to take some deep breaths, and then all of a sudden, like he stopped crying. because you just you kind of steer his mind in a little different direction, right? But again, as a coach, if we can't steer that direction because we're stuck in our own anger or frustration, then it's gonna be a hard time getting those guys to get to where they want to go. So I think that's kind of the main thing, is that, definitely be honest with them, talk about the things. It's a teaching moment, hopefully. Like, here's the mistakes we made. We want to make sure we talk about them so we know not to do them again. But at the same time, let's steer them to the next one. And as long as that, like, the energy and effort improves the next one, then I have no problem with that.
Yeah, I've been watching, and maybe I'm just because I don't do as much on the weekends as much anymore, but I've been watching a lot of baseball and softball. They've been finding their way onto TV, and I got Flow Sports, so Flow College pretty much shows all like D3 and a lot of D2 sports, and so I'm watching a lot of baseball and softball recently. And for example, I was watching softball this weekend, and it was, or maybe not, I don't know if it was this weekend, but recently I was watching like Ohio State playing Michigan, like the big game essentially, and the first two games, Michigan came out and run ruled Ohio State back-to-back games. The first Friday, Saturday, whatever it was, and Ohio State coach was like, I don't care what those first games were. I want you guys to go out there and be aggressive at the plate, and I want you guys to swing at any good pitch you see, whether you hit or you don't. I want us to be aggressive. And they ended up hitting 7 home runs in that game, which was like one away from tying like the Big Ten record in a game, and completely flipped the script, on the last game of the weekend essentially. And so I reference that because, like you said, you have to, if you harp on them, because it's very easy, I'm sure, for Ohio State, like, dang, we lost the series. Man, like they've come out here and dominated us at home or wherever. I don't know if it was at home, but they dominated us. And then the coach was like, who cares? Go out here and swing. Change up our plate appearance, change up our approach at the plate, and let's just see. And they came out, and I don't know if they run ruled them, but I think they beat them by 9 or whatever. So it completely flipped the script, and it's cool that just I got to see exactly what you said. Essentially, I guess in hindsight, I watched it a little bit ago, but exactly what you're saying of you got to have this game does not dictate tomorrow's game, does not dictate next weekend's slate. It doesn't matter if we faced them or not already. We have to come out and understand where we messed up. Cool, but we're not going to be it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I think as a coach, I don't throw any pitches, I don't take any swings, I don't field any ground balls, but and I can't affect the game in terms of that, but I think my mentality and my energy can affect the game. Right. And so, like I said, I think they're young, impressionable people. Even at when they're 20, 22, they're still trying to figure things out. And some guys are going to be able to just kind of move on. That's the way they are. But a lot of kids kind of need that little bit of a push. And if they know that you have their back and that you're going to support them, then I think that helps them kind of move on to the next one, right? Otherwise, they're like, oh man, coach is mad too, and then that just adds to it. And then they spend their time thinking about that, right? We talk about control of controllables on our program a lot, and we talk about learning from the past, but not letting the past debilitate you in the future. And those are hard things. Again, I struggled with that for a long time as a player and as a coach, and so hopefully I'm able to kind of pass that along to our kids, for the most part, and they can move on to the next one, because you're gonna have failures in life. I hate to tell you,
for sure.
Things aren't gonna go your way all the time, and you got to keep fighting. We have a thing we talk about TTD in our program, which means to the death, and we want to fight to the death until that last out is made. We're going to keep battling, and again, at the end of the day, I can look in the mirror and say, regardless of what happened in the game, I got the most out of myself and the people around me, and that's how I can be determining whether I was successful or not.
I'm definitely taking that TTD thing, because it's interesting, because we I've implemented some things. We have an all-in reference, and we have some things that we've thrown out there, but our logo or our mascot is the Vikings, and I've referenced things like that, like what if Vikings or this, whatever, it's Viking style, but what do Vikings do? Well, they fight till the death. They don't care. They come in and they do their job, and they take what they wanted to, they come in and take what they were there for, which we're not going to dive into the whole Scandinavian time frame of what all they were doing, but they were fighting till death, right? They were warriors, and so TTD, I'm gonna have to take that, because that's a great idea, especially in wrestling. You're literally in a combat, legal combat sport in high school or college, and so we got to have the mentality of till the death. It don't matter if we're down 9 points, so we're up 9 points. We gotta find a way to go, right. And so I like that. I'm gonna take that one for sure. I might have to implement that. But you mentioned that you started at high school and now you're at the college level. So what are some challenges, or maybe a challenge or some challenges, however you want to reference it, non-recruiting, because I know recruiting probably is its own challenge that you had to face of adjusting to, but just as a coach, besides recruiting, what were some challenges that you faced going from high school to the college level, and just maybe your whole time as a college, maybe like your whole timeline essentially of that you've had to face and you've had to learn how to overcome, and now they're not so much of a challenge anymore, or now you just know how to attack them whenever they come up?
I think when I came to Lewis and Clark, I came from another college pro. I was at Willamette, my alma mater. We'd had a pretty good thing going there. When I came to Lewis and Clark, the program had not had much success in a long time, and so I think just kind of learning like how to deal with that losing side of things, but still kind of keep the ship moving forward, I think was tough. Because again, I hate to lose. I'm a competitive guy, and it was very frustrating. I think I lost my first 12 games here at Lewis and Clark, so I was like, are we ever going to win a game? So that was tough, but I think, as long as, again, if you can be the guy who keeps fighting, keeps battling, and sets that example for your players, then they're going to buy into that as well, right? I think, look at some of the pillars of our program. Like, I don't know if our work ethic was what it needed. So we had to get some guys in here who really kind of have that work ethic, but showing that myself, I think, was a challenge, right? There was a lot of work that went into kind of turning our program from one that wasn't successful to now we've had 3 winning seasons in the last 4 years and went to a regional for the first time in 30 some years. So I think those are challenges. I think also when you deal with high school students and college students, is a little bit different mindset as well.
For sure.
Even though they're a little bit older, they still have their issues, right? They're on their own for the first time maybe in their life. They've always had the security of their family, and now they don't. So like making sure that you're paying attention to those guys was important. As a high school coach and teacher, I saw those guys almost every single day. In the off season, like I don't see our guys all the time. So like making sure that I stay in touch with those guys and they're supported and they have what they need. Also, academics is a big deal at our school. It's very challenging, and so making sure I'm staying on top of those guys, and we've been very successful academically here. We've had over a 3.5 team GPA for 3.5 years. So
nice.
So I think really trying to help those guys and support them in what they need as a college student versus a high school student. I think those are some of the biggest challenges I've had to face. So
kind of speaking of just time frame of you being as a coach, you've seen the game evolve. You obviously played back, and I guess we touched on this earlier about or I guess you kind of touched on it, how you don't know if you could have got recruited or drafted now. I guess this is going to be kind of more of a when it comes to like drills and techniques in the game of baseball. What do you think are the most overrated and or underrated things that you've seen or that is happening in the world of baseball when it comes to whether it's technical side, whether it's drills, whether it's just mindsets, whatever it is, but some overrated and underrated things that you see?
There certainly has been some advances in the technical skill side of things in baseball, right? And since I played, I say I probably couldn't get drafted nowadays, but also if I had some of the things that some of the guys have now,
fair point.
Maybe I could, right?
Yeah.
Everybody talks about back in the old days, these guys weren't as good as they are now. I'm like, well, if they have all the things that you guys have now, they probably would be the same.
Who knows?
So.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about. For me, I'm not a crazy gadgety drill guy. I always joke with our pitchers all the time, like, I don't know how I got to Pro Bowl without all these plyo balls and all this other stuff. And again, I don't disagree with what they do, right? I know there's been advances. I know there's people a lot smarter than me who are using these things to help people become better throwers and players, right? But at the same time, we try to do what you're going to do in a game. You see a lot of drills and they look really cool on Instagram and Twitter and that kind of stuff, but if that's something we're not going to do in a game, then we're not going to do it. And I think over the years, I tried to practice a million different things, and then I've really kind of squished that down to where what's the thing we're going to do in the game the most? I don't have 16 bunt defenses and all this kind of stuff, and we don't practice bunt defense that much because it doesn't happen that much anymore, right? So really trying to figure out specific to their position, but also specific to the game, what's going to happen the most, and what are the things that are going to help us have the best chance to win games. I think a lot of guys love to hit and do all that kind of stuff, but if you don't practice situational hitting, then that's just hitting, and you're gonna have to rely on guys, getting extra base hits where if we can get a guy on first base, steal a base, get a wild pitch, get a base hit, or get a fly ball or ground ball that's going to score him, let's do that, because those are the things we need to practice. So a little bit of old school, I'd say, in terms of those things, but I think there's a lot of stuff out there that I don't want to call it eyewash, but a lot of people who are trying to make money off these fancy drills where I don't see that happening in the game, and so I don't know why that's something we want to practice a ton.
Yeah, that interesting that you say that the bunting, so I guess small ball isn't as utilized, which I guess is fair. I don't see a whole lot in comparison to what you used to see. But it is interesting because I feel like that is a pretty dynamic part of the game, especially whenever you haven't done it all game, and then you have a really good drag bunt or a situation where a bunt may come and they're not prepared for, right? And it can kind of swing that momentum, which I haven't really talked about momentum in baseball in a long time to a coach, but momentum in baseball is a thing. Basketball, you can feel it. Wrestling can feel it. Football, you can feel it. Baseball, if you're just kind of a casual fan, you don't really know that there's a momentum swing, but a pit, you might have a situation like that where a bunt may swing the momentum because you either get runners in scoring position or put a little bit more pressure on that pitcher or have to change up the defense to where they can't. And you guys may or may not do it, but shifts and stuff like that may not be able to be happening because of what you're positioning or because of what you're doing, right? And anyways, momentum in baseball is a real thing. And surprising that small ball is not as common as it used to be.
Yeah, I think there's certainly some teams that do it more than others, and you game plan for that stuff. But I think the kind of the trend, and I think there's a lot of things that happen in the major league game that filter down to the other levels that maybe don't pertain to the other levels, but that's what the big league guys do, right?
Fair.
I was against catching on a knee for a long time, and I still think some guys. So I still think some guys probably don't need it, but when you're a 230-pound dude catching 170 games a year, like, it makes sense, right? And those kind of things where our guys are maybe a little bit more agile, but again, those are things that I've kind of had to adjust to, but. I think nowadays the trend is, it's extra base hits and home runs because, guys are throwing 100 in the big leagues. So you kind of have to try to hit a home run because putting multiple hits together is pretty tough. At our level, that's not the same thing. So I think we have to pay attention, whatever your level, whatever is going to be successful at your level. So there is certainly some of it, but I don't think I bunt as much as I used to when I started here, but we have better hitters too. So,
Fair point,
I think you got to pay attention to the situation. Yeah. So. We're always trying to get guys into scoring position. We'd love to be able to do it with, guys getting on base and stealing. But if you can't do that, you might have to bunt. And again, it's tough sometimes. It's funny because usually it's the end of the game where you need that bunt to get down, and the guys can't execute it because they haven't done it all game. And so it's crazy. So, but
Sure.
you kind of do what you think is going to give your team the best chance to win.
Yeah, so it matters be in that position to score runs and just be in the hunt to win, and get your hand raised essentially at the end of the day. Sorry, that was a wrestling reference, but get opportunity for you guys to shake hands right on the field, on the infield, on the baseball field. So so just briefly touching base on development, because the game has evolved, and so you mentioned some underrated and overrated things in the game, but whenever we talk about athletes and you say some of the things that they have done and maybe just how the game has developed in terms of, like you said, some of the things that these athletes get from a young age that we didn't have or that you didn't have, whatever. You have a kid who expects to come in here and he thinks that he's going to be the starter. He thinks that, he's going to be that guy, and he's not. So what I'm getting to is where do you start with development for your athletes, and how do you get that kid who maybe a relief pitcher who's getting, one inning a weekend, or maybe he's not getting any relief or doesn't get any ABs, however you want to think about this, to where now this person's able to step in and get a little bit more activity, a little bit more role play, a little bit more roles. There we go. When it comes to, the game. So where do you start, and how do you get a kid to go from that JV or no playing time to getting minutes or playing time?
Yeah, it happens, right? And I think at the college level, I always talk to the guys about, everybody loves it in the fall because everybody gets to play. When we get to the spring, like, there's only 10 spots on the lineup card, so some guys maybe don't love it as much. But I think, and also, for some of the guys who come in, it's the first time maybe they've never got to play in their life. There's always been a freshman team or a JV team, or there's a travel teams they can go play on. Nowadays, like, if you're not in the starting lineup, like, you're not in the game. So that can be a challenge for sure. I think. For us, it's definitely important that whether you're the number one guy on the team, or the number 30 guy on the team, like, we're putting as much time into you regardless. And so I think showing those guys that we're here to try to help them is number one thing, right? But I also think being honest with them about here's the reasons that this guy is playing over you, and maybe come down to performance and maybe come down to some kind of skill set thing. I think we're always going to look at the physical side of things first. Are you as strong as you need to be? Are you as mobile as you need to be? Is there some kind of thing that's holding you back that way? If you're slower than another guy, there's probably an opportunity the guy who's faster is going to play.
Yeah.
So being honest with those guys that way, but also think really trying to individualize what it looks like. As a young coach, I probably knew like one way to do things, and that was the way you needed to do it. And if you didn't do it that way, I probably disagreed with what you're doing. And now I think as coaches, in my staff at least, we're trying to be as versed as possible in as many different ways to do things. There's certainly absolutes that we have that we think need to be done, but hopefully we can teach it in a number of different ways for guys and realize that, it doesn't have to look like this guy. This guy doesn't have to look like that guy. We have some hitters that I don't know if you would teach them to hit the way they do, but they came here, they've been successful, and they've continued to be successful. I'm not going to coach that out of them. So I think really kind of identifying the things that are keeping them from being on the field and making sure that we're staying with them on working on those things. And that also requires some extra time. It might be some extra time with our hitting coach. It might be some extra time with our pitching coach or infield coach or whatever it is. So I think like as long as the kids know that you're still putting that time into them, regardless of whether they're playing or not, I think they're going to be driven to keep going. So, and the other thing I'd say is we try to do player development plans at the end of every fall and end of every spring. And it used to be a situation where we would tell them what to do in the off season, and now we let the players bring the player development plans to us. What do they want to do, right? And we're obviously going to add our thoughts into it to make it a comprehensive one. But I think if the player brings it to us, they're more likely to put the time in to do it because it's their idea. Whereas an adult, adults are all idiots, right? And they're the man. So we don't want to do exactly what they want to say. So if they're bringing it to us, I think that's been much more successful. And you certainly have to steer it sometimes because there are some rabbit holes the guys can go down, especially on the pitching side. There's so many different things out there nowadays. But I think if you can kind of come together with a pretty good plan in the off-season period and then find kids who are motivated to do the work, then I think you're going to have some success and some guys develop for sure.
How do you feel about the whole redshirting thing? Maybe as a whole, do you feel like that helps with development too? Like, is that something that you feel like you put a lot of your athletes through, whether it's freshman year or, I mean, I know that's a common thing as they come in and they redshirt freshman year, but like, is redshirting something that you feel like maybe two-part, one is important to you or your program, but two is another huge piece of that development side?
Well, it's actually not allowed at our level, so it doesn't
really?
happen. But
Okay.
I definitely think there's certainly some value in that. I think the kids have to realize, and part of the reason that it's frustrating in the recruiting game sometimes is that, like, do you want to go to college for 5 years? So that's something you have to ask yourself, right? Do you want to be in there that long, or do you want to have an opportunity to move into the next step of your life? So those are things I think you have to ask. But I think there's certainly some guys who would benefit from that time and development. But you have to find the right kind of guy who's going to continue to work, even though they know they're not going to be able to get on the field that year. So that's challenging for sure. And that's, I think, why a lot of guys you see leaving nowadays, because, that's tough to sit there and not have that opportunity. But I definitely think that can help. I think just the physical side of things, probably more than anything else, because as you get older in your maturation process, naturally you're going to get more strength and more, speed and agility and those kind of things. But, just a year in the weight room for some of these kids has changed a number of people, right? My assistant coach, Jack Thompson, who was the D3 National Player of the Year a couple of years ago, he came in our program at 185 pounds and hit 2 homers, and then his last year he was 235 and hit 23 homers. So, and I put on 25 pounds and 8 miles an hour in college. So we know what the weight room and that kind of thing can do for you. So I definitely think there is some benefit to it. But again, you got to look at it long range. Like, is this going to really benefit me in the long run of things?
Yeah, for sure. Looking at it as an overall for the athlete individually, but also as a team, right? Putting them hand in hand is definitely important. So, I can understand that, and I did not know that you are not allowed to do that Division III, at least at least
They
D3
tried
baseball.
to add it this year, but they decided not to. So, and I think the big thing for us is that like our school is pretty expensive, right? A lot of schools at our level are pretty expensive. So that's another year paying for that. That's a lot for families. It's a lot already, and so I think the academic side of things is really stressed at our level, which is what I love about being at the D3 level. And you can get done in 4 years and move on with your life and hopefully have a great experience here, but hopefully, set yourself up for a great experience after you're done.
Fair point. Yeah. No, that's great. That's a great thought process. Yeah. The extra year of X amount of money, that's not always the most fun thing to think about. So, fair. Okay. So since we're talking about these kids and we're talking about all these kids coming in and stuff, just to kind of touch briefly on recruiting, I don't want to dive too much into it in terms of depth, because I know that there's a lot to it, but kind of a brief question here is, where do you find your athletes, especially baseball, knowing that baseball is such an international sport, and I know Division III, you may have stipulations on what you can or can't bring in or what you can or can't do. I mean, just like every level, but where are you finding your kids? And then what are you looking for in your athletes? Is there something size when it comes to like the physical traits? Is it the mental traits, which I know you talked about earlier about like the ego thing, about how like that's something that you try to figure out in that regard. But what about an athlete is I guess important to you whenever you're looking for them?
Sure. Yeah, I think you always try to recruit your home first, and for us it's been frustrating. We haven't had as many Northwest kids as we'd like. We're starting to get a couple more, but most of our kids come from California. So we have 30 guys this year, 25 are California kids. I think a lot of those kids, first of all, there's more of them in California, right? Obviously. But I also think there's kids who are looking for an experience different than they've always had in college. And I think that allows them to come up to Lewis and Clark. We have a very beautiful campus. We have great facilities, and I think the experience we offer is definitely one that, can set them up for life. So we're going to recruit probably the West Coast more than anything else for sure. We've had some guys from around the area. We have a guy from the Chicago area. I have a guy who's from France who. Oh wow! Just kind of, I didn't go to France to look for him. It just kind of worked out that way. But we're looking for the best players we can obviously find. But I think the first thing I always look at before I even watch you play is what's your GPA. Yeah. Not only getting into school, but just with the cost of the school, knowing what kind of merit money you're going to get. So we're looking for probably kids like 3.8 unweighted and above, just because I know the merit money you'll get is probably going to make it somewhat feasible in terms of the cost, right? We certainly have kids below that, but for the most part, you're going to pay a lot of money if you're below that. Yeah. So that's something I think every coach at our level has to pay attention to. And then, I'm looking at certain kids. Number one, they have to be as good or better than the players we have, or potentially get there. Mm-hmm. We keep our roster limited, right? We have 30 guys in our program. We probably go up a little bit more, but we vow to travel every single guy on every trip. So we keep it smaller. I want to be able to have individual relationships with my players, and I know if it gets too much bigger, I can't. It's hard enough already with 30 guys. Of course. We want competition in our program, but we also don't want 6 guys at every position. Numbers. You can't get the repetitions in that time, and I can't coach that many guys. Mm-hmm. So those are things that are important. And then when we're breaking down what we want outside of academics and your ability to play, we look for the pillars of our program. Outwork everybody. Are you a great teammate? Those are the questions I ask coaches. Are they a good worker? Are they a great teammate? How do they handle failure? Are they competitive, and do they take pride in what they do? Those are the things I think that are the hard things to figure out just by talking to a kid, because just like I can tell you anything I want about our school, you can tell me anything you want about me. So talking to the people who are around them on a regular basis, I think, is an important part of the process. And finding people you trust to give you honest evaluations, because there are some coaches that'll obviously pump up their guys regardless. So I think that's been a challenge, but I think when you find the right guys who you can get good recommendations from, I think that's a big part of it as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's the beauty there, is like you as a college coach, you get to kind of pick and choose your lineup, and we can't bat 1,000 all the time, but you're able to bring in these people that fit your culture and fit what you're looking for, which we'll get into culture here in a little bit. But you get to bring these people in who fit academically, athletically, and personally, so that way which I think is also a big thing too, right? Like you have to be able to find people that not only want to be coached, but also fit your style. Maybe baseball might be a little bit different. I haven't asked this question, so I don't know the actual rundown on it. But like, for example, in wrestling, like the men's coach, he's a taller guy, so he feels comfortable and he really likes coaching. He can coach anybody, but he's always been a taller guy, and he's just kind of naturally been more, what's the right even term? He's always been kind of like I don't know how to put it, but he always kind of leaned more towards the height, I guess the right terminology. Yeah, so he kind of naturally has a taller lineup because that's who he is, right? So I guess the best way to describe it is he coaches and gets athletes who kind of fit not only his comfort level, but also something he knows how to coach, right? That he's comfortable coaching, that he feels like there's success there. So I guess putting that in baseball terms, I don't know if there's that style of viewing whenever you're looking for kids, but I guess you might also be looking to get kids and athletes who fit your physical attributes, that maybe something that are eye catching, or maybe they said something, or that there's some things that you also may be recruiting for outside of, yeah, this guy's better, right? Not just for the team and he'll make us better, but you may also be going after, and not putting these in your words, but or speaking for you, but some coaches may, in baseball, may have something that they are willing to sacrifice because they know that they can get more out of this kid in terms of, because of these attributes or something, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think, especially at our level, like, we don't get like polished guys a lot, right? We don't get guys that throw 90 out of high school and, they're hitting 400-foot home runs very often. So you really have to be able to develop them. So you have to be able to look at guys who potentially have more room for growth physically, but also like skill wise. And then you have to have hopefully a pretty good development system and good coaches to bring that out of them, right? But I think you also kind of, you'll see some teams who maybe recruit to their field, right? Some schools have like a shorter right field or left field, and so they'll get a bunch of left-handed hitters to do that, or they bring in a certain kind of pitcher. We don't always get the choice. Yes, we recruit guys, but at a school that's very difficult to get into, that is pretty expensive, right? You don't always get the perfect kids that you want. So you try to get the best fits for your program as you can. Sometimes it's not perfect, but we're certainly trying to find guys that, like I said, that kind of fit our culture more than anything else. And I'll take a guy who's maybe a little less talented, but who's really going to be a great fit, because I think, down the road, that guy's going to be helpful where, somebody maybe a little bit more talented might bring more drama to our program, and that's going to be more work for our players and our coaches dealing with that person than trying to move our team forward.
Yeah.
And I mean, speaking of culture, I mean, that's a great segue to kind of get to these philosophy questions that I was talking to you about. But, speaking of culture, how do you build a culture? I should say a successful culture on the level of buy-in and mindset?
I think as a coach, you have to live it first. And I remember a couple of years ago when I was a high school coach, I was running a tournament at our field, and there's a coach out here I highly respect who's coached at the Division I level and everywhere. And he's like, "Man, you work really hard down here." I was like, "Well, if I expect my players to do it, I have to role model that, right?" So certainly I'm not afraid to admit my mistakes, and sometimes I mess things up, and I'll be honest with our kids about that. But I think that's the number one thing. You have to live what you're talking about, because if you're a hypocrite and you say do this and you don't do it yourself, kids are not going to buy in. So I think that's something I really tried to do. I think that's what I try to have our coaches do as well. That's number one. But I think also, like, picking what you believe in and sticking to it, right? Some teams will have, a different motto every year, or they'll have a motto the first day and then they don't really stick to those things. So, like a TTD, or I have a ton of acronyms in our program, way too many probably, but those are the things that they hear about on a constant basis. And they may not be able to, pop them off the top of their head what all of them are, but I think the overall message definitely gets to them. The number one, we're here to make them the best person they can possibly be. We have one word in our program called arete, which is a Greek word that means the constant pursuit of one's potential. And it's exactly what I want our guys to follow, right? I want them to always be, whether it's on the field, off the field, whatever it is, I want them to trying to be the absolute best they can be at that. Because again, it goes back to my dad's quote about, if you're going to do something, it better be worth putting your signature on, right? So,
for sure, yeah.
And we know if our guys are going to attack their passions and everything they do to the best of their ability, may not be the ultimate guy at that passion or that activity, but they're going to be the best that they can be. And again, that allows them to be successful, and they can look in the mirror every day and say, yeah, I got the most out of that. So I think modeling it, number one, but also like making sure that you really stick to it and teach as many things as you can within what you think your culture is about.
I love that quote by your dad. I'm actually writing that down right now. If you're going to do something, make sure. I know you said it earlier, but the more I hear it, the more I like it. So I'm writing that one down for sure. If you're going to do something, make sure you can put your signature to it. I love that. So then my final question for you, at least on this, I have a few fun questions I mentioned to you earlier that we'll finish on. But my final little deep question is actually the name of the show. Is why do you do this? What's your coach's why?
It's a great question. Some days I ask myself that, but I think, like I said, when I got into it, I wanted to really use what I know and what I love, which is the game of baseball, to influence younger people in a positive manner. And when I was assistant coach at Willamette, I always wanted to be a head coach. And when I turned 40 10 years ago, I kind of did a midlife evaluation. I don't want to call it a crisis, but an evaluation. And I said, if I died today, have I accomplished everything I want to accomplish? And my answer was no. And so I decided there's 3 goals that I wanted to have professionally from that time on. I wanted to be a master motivator, I wanted to be a master mentor, and I want as many people at my funeral as possible. Not in a selfish way, but because I was able to affect them enough positively that they decided to come back and pay their respects for the time that I put into them. So that's what I really try to do. Like I said, I think as a coach, initially I got into it maybe for my own ego and trying to win and show everybody that I knew everything, and then I've really kind of come to the point now where I do this because I want to have as big a positive effect on as many people as I can. And this is the best way I know how to do that. So that's my why. And I'm hoping that, that goes to me as a father and as a husband as well, that my family gets the best of me and not the rest of me. And, I think those are things that we can try to really help shape kids in a positive direction. I'm not here to tell them what to do, but I'm here to challenge them to really examine what they want to be about. Because I think when they get to our level, they take hopefully the best things from their parents and what they learned as a kid, and now they're trying to figure out what am I going to add to that to become who I am. And I want to be part of that equation. I want to try to help them out. And like I said, 10, 15, 20 years from now, I want to hear them talk about the things that we talked about in this program and how it's helped shape them to become what they wanted to be.
I love that. That's a great why. For someone who says they don't know some days what they want to do, that's a great, which I think we all have that, but that's a great why. I love that. Going into ultimately, I think, and you've also kind of touched on that throughout the episode too, which kind of naturally we talk about things, and sometimes you say things about the why that you may not think about, but I know that the athletes and what they end up being afterwards was something that we spoke on earlier as well. So great why. I love that. So I appreciate that. And so if you guys are still listening to this, if you guys know we're at the episode, we're gonna finish on some fun questions to end the show. But if you guys are still watching this, if you're on YouTube, make sure you guys hit that bell, like, subscribe, all the 9 yards. If you guys are an audio listener, make sure you guys hit those stars, leave a review, say what you got to say, but say it with your chest, because Coach and I want to hear it. Final fun questions for you, Coach.
Okay.
New question. Haven't asked this one. I've asked this once before to a soccer coach, and I'm like, oh, that would be great. The reason why is because I used to ask what state produces the best high school baseball. Now, we probably can argue, and I hear it every time, so it's hard for me to continue to hear it because they're going to say the states that stay warm all the time, So Texas, Florida, Louisiana, Cali, Arizona, right? Those are some of the hot, probably 95, 98% of the time. That's the state. Unless you have a different opinion, that's probably what I hear a lot. And so the new question I have is, since you have been around baseball, you've seen baseball, what division, this is college question, of course, what division is the most entertaining to watch?
I'd probably be lying to you if I didn't say Division One. I think there's a lot of extra stuff that's going on in Division One and our level, so kind of a little bit too. But obviously those are the top level players, right? So it's, if you watch like UCLA right now, it's obviously a team close to us, and some of the guys they're running out there are crazy. But USC's got guys. We're not very far from Oregon State, and Oregon State's got some pretty unbelievable players as well. So does Oregon. I mean, there's a ton of talent all over the place. So I think at the Division III level, there's certainly some talented players and some guys who can play Division I, but there's not as many of them, and so it's a little bit more of a classic baseball fan who'd really have to love it. So I'd probably say the Division I level is definitely probably the top one. I mean, nobody watches the Division III, National Basketball Championship, but everybody watches, the Final Four, and same with football. So, I think it's, that's definitely where I would probably go to.
Okay. Who is your favorite player of all time?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. I'd say there's a couple. Like, I've always, I didn't play third base, but there's 3 third basemen I've always loved. Matt Williams, who used to play for the Giants. Yep. Scott Rowland, who played for the Cardinals and the yep. Eagles, not the Eagles, the Phillies, and then Nolan Arenado is probably my other guy. Okay. Just because I love the way they play.
Are you a Cardinals guy?
No, I'm not. But all those guys play the game the right way. Okay. They play super hard. They've all been pretty humble in the way they did it. Matt Williams, I loved back in the day. I mean, the only games we could get were the Giants games when I was a kid. So Matt Williams would hit home run, and he put his head down and run around the bases as fast as he could. And I've always kept that mentality to me where, if I do what I'm supposed to do, I don't need to celebrate and make somebody else feel bad about it. they already feel bad about it because they gave him a home run.
For
so,
sure. Yeah.
You know, trying to respect the game. It's always something I loved about pro ball is respecting the game was always the number one thing. If you disrespected somebody, that was probably the worst thing you could do. And now it's a different world, but we're trying to still hold that line and teach our guys to respect the game the same way. So those are the guys I probably like more than anybody else.
Okay. Final question. Who's the GOAT? Greatest of all time?
You talking about baseball?
Yes, sir.
Depends on what you're talking about. I'd say if you're talking about like hitters, I don't think there's anybody better than Barry Bonds.
Okay.
Like him or hate him, the things that he did were unbelievable, considering you know the way that he was pitched to and that he was still able to put up those numbers. And whether he was enhanced in doing it, I don't know. I'll leave that to you to decide. But still, you still got to do it, right? And you know, I think that's I think there was never a hitter who's done the things that he was able to do.
Okay.
You know, if you're talking pitching side, probably my favorite pitcher of all time was probably Maddox. Whether he was the best pitcher of all time, I don't know. But just again, games I got to watch as a kid was the Braves games, and watching him just work was pretty unbelievable. Doing things that I could never do, making the ball move the ways that I could never do, and just it was pretty unbelievable to watch him play.
Greg Maddux and Barry Bonds. I mean, I don't ever really say my goats or anything like that. I don't really ever throw my pins out there like that. But I will say that Barry Bonds is one I have mentioned before, and I agree. I think he's debated. I think he has to be in the argument for the best of all time when it comes to hitting. You know, I got to watch him. My mom actually got hit, which I mentioned this on a few episodes ago. But we actually were watching him. We went to Colorado and watched them play the Rockies, right? So like Todd Helton was kind of beginning of his prime, whatever, and back when the Rockies weren't the worst team in the world. But we actually got hit with the foul ball by Barry Bonds. My mom got pegged in BP, line drive. I was like 8 or 9, so I was scared. I've never seen a 100+ mile an hour fastball, coming my way. So everybody ducked except for her, and she ended up getting hit in the leg, and we never got that ball, which kind of sucks. But it was. But I would agree. I got to see him, and it was amazing. So regardless, like you said, regardless of if he was enhanced or not, and regardless of the argument there, he was. I think he's one of the best. He is, if not the best hitter of all time. So I'll vouch with that statement, and people can say what they want, and that's my answer for hitters. Is Barry Bonds is definitely up there as well. So absolutely, I appreciate you diving into those too, and talking about your goats and your favorites and everything like that. But Coach, I really appreciate you jumping on here and talking baseball and talking about your coaching style or coaching philosophy and everything like that. Really good episode. I took a few things, and I'm going to probably actually one of these is going to be said today in our practice here in a little bit. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet, man. It was always a pleasure to talk about coaching and trying to figure out best ways to help the kids of the future, right?
For sure, yeah. I'd love to have you back on at some point. I think it'd be really cool to hear your behind the scenes stuff, more on the day-to-days and some of those things. Some coaches want to give out the juice and the sauce and some don't, but I would love to hear more about it. I think I could take more, and hopefully you guys listening are also took something from this and we'll be able to utilize it in your guys' coaching as well. But Coach, again, thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for watching, for listening. But with that being said, we will see you guys on the next one. Peace.